Republican Seniors of Minnesota. We bring seniors 50 plus together.
Learn about and discuss issues that are important to Minnesotans. Hear from our elected officials and experts on public policy.
Meet political candidates, elect delegates to district and state conventions, and help elect Republicans to office at all levels.
We believe in and advocate for the principles of personal responsibility, economic prosperity, peace through strong national defense,
and limited, sensible government. Republican Seniors of Minnesota, thanks for joining us.
Good morning. We are on the air and welcoming our people who are watching live stream. It's a very cold morning here in Minnesota. It's 5 below. It's actually warmer than it was in January when we got together. So I imagine there are people who decided to live stream and stay home. We also heard from a couple members who are ill today who are planning to watch the live stream, so we're happy to be able to offer this. I am Carol Brumwell. I'm the chair of the Republican Seniors of Minnesota. I'm your master of ceremony for this meeting. As I said, the meeting is being live streamed. A few quick courtesy reminders. Please turn off your cell phones so that in respect of our speakers, we don't have cell phones going off. The chairs that are closest to the beverage station are off camera, so if you choose to make a comment, we'll bring a microphone to you. If you would move a little further in towards the center so that you can be seen as well as heard, that'd be much appreciated. If you need to have a conversation, either do it in a whisper, and because many of us are hearing impaired, maybe you need to take it out the east door and close the door to have your conversation. Sound check. Is everybody able to hear me? Elaine, are you okay? Elaine is talking to somebody. Okay, Chuck and John say they're okay back there. Our immediate past chair, Mike Lehman, is here on the soundboard. If for some reason you're not able to hear, please raise your hand. He'll be keeping an eye out and up the volume level. Please join me in an opening prayer. Gracious God, we thank you for this opportunity to gather for a meeting. We thank you for each and every one who is here today. Please bless our speakers this day. Help them to communicate clearly the wisdom they have to share. We pray for those in government office, especially our Minnesota legislature. Help them make laws to protect our freedoms so that we can live peaceful, quiet lives in godliness and dignity. We pray for the judges across our land, from the local level to the high courts. Help them to judge wisely and fairly. Please give them wisdom and discernment to balance justice and mercy. God be with us as we cherish our families this week. Help us recall happy memories and build new ones to sustain us through difficult times. God of peace, help us to see in all others the gifts they are employing to carry out your will. May we have a spirit of camaraderie in this room and as we work together on our shared mission. Amen. We'd like to acknowledge our military and veterans and active or retired police officers and first responders. Would those please stand? Thank you, and we'll have you remain standing, and the rest of us will join you as we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Be seated. If you have a brief 30-second announcement, I'll ask that you give us that just before we do the door prize at the very end. I've had a number of people give me a heads up that they would like to speak, so we'll make sure that the microphone comes around to them and also to anyone else who has a brief announcement. You're welcome to stay in the room for conversation after the close of the formal meeting. We have the room until noon, so feel free to continue your conversations and networking. We want to say a big thank you to the additional volunteers who stepped forward after our January meeting. We did get a couple additional volunteers. We could still use 2 more so we can rotate who is at the back of the room for checking people in at the meeting. We also are going to need to elect 5 new board members for our board of 9. I am not running as chair. I'll continue as past chair. But we need 5 new board members. If you would please see Mike Lehman, who is starting our nominations committee. Mike will be conducting interviews and making sure you understand what the duties are. Those duties are listed in our Constitution. That Constitution is available from the About page on our website. It's the very last line. Click the button, you can read the Constitution. We'll be having those elections in April, and we'd like to hear from you by March 1st if you are willing to serve on our board. And we're going to need the help. So appreciate anybody who could consider that. The commitment of time for the board is about 10 hours a month. Commitment of time for the back of the room assistance is about 3 hours a month. The State Party Secretary, Joy Orvis, has asked for volunteers for 2-hour shifts on weekdays between 10 and 4 at the front desk of the Edina office. The duty is to answer the phones and greet people who walk in. I have the job description up here. It seems pretty straightforward to me. If you are willing to volunteer in that regard, please email joy@mngop.com or call her on her phone, 763-232-6329. She also asked that we keep an eye out for students who may need to do, intern roles. So she has intern roles available for students. If you know of someone who would like to have an intern opportunity at MNGOP, also contact Joy. Our group had been volunteering at MNGOP to do the envelope stuffing of the receipts. I don't have a date again for that process to continue on. As soon as I have it, we'll publicize it. Just don't show up on the 3rd Thursday this month either, okay? Our first speaker today is Alex Plekish, who was elected to the role of Chairman, Republican Party of Minnesota, by the State Central Committee in December and took office January 1st. I've extended an open invitation for him to attend any of our meetings and asked him particularly today to speak about his vision for the Republican Party of Minnesota and the role of affiliates, such as our Republican seniors. I expect he may also have a few comments to make regarding the recall petitions for the 66 Minnesota House DFL representatives who boycotted the legislative session since January 14th. They came back on back to work on February 6th. They collected their pay, they collected their per diem, and we are sponsoring recall petitions as far as I know. Alex graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy with distinction, being the #1 aerospace engineer and Marine officer in his class. He served out his military commitment as a Marine Corps fighter pilot. After his military service, he built a successful career in business and finance while dedicating decades to veterans advocacy. He's held top leadership positions in organizations including chapter president of the National Trust of the U.S. Naval Academy, chairman of the USS Minnesota Pre-Commissioning Task Force. He was on a governor-appointed board member and finance chair of the Perpich Center for the Arts. He's past president and chairman of Tee It Up for the Troops, and he's served as a church deacon, leading the largest outreach program. Since attending his first precinct caucus in 2004, Alex has been involved at every level of the Minnesota Republican Party. Please join me in welcoming Alex Plekish.
Thank you, Carol. I actually didn't expect that introduction, so bear with me here. I have no prepared remarks. I will tell you that. I'm here just to talk off the cuff. And yes, I will talk about some of the things we're doing, but I wanted to touch on two things that would be non-traditional to talk about in a thing like this, and that was triggered by the opening points of your agenda. One is I want to talk about the fact that you have an opening prayer, and the prayer that I heard Carol recite was a very sincere one. But that actually plays a big part, frankly, in what I'm doing here in leadership. And I should ask that, can you all hear me in the back okay? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, very good. I will tell you that I was not planning to run for chair. I was actually in Europe during the election. I voted early. I had no role in the Republican Party at that point for the first time in 20 years, so I did something that I'd been planning to do at some point in my life, which is to do a big, extensive family heritage trek through the Balkans. I hit 10 countries and so on. And I basically got no sleep the night I was in Gospic, Croatia, where my dad was born and where Nikola Tesla was born. I didn't get any sleep that night because that was the night of the election, so I was up kind of checking things out. No internet where I was. And then I was in Serbia, 2 countries later, when I heard that my good friend, Pete Hegseth, was picked as Secretary of Defense. Now, yeah. By the way, he's no longer talking to me, and it's not anything to do with me. It's that once he got confirmed, it went silent. My texts to him are now not being responded to, other than maybe an occasional fist bump. And my guess is that the protocol of SecDef is you really can't say anything via text. It's all monitored and so on. So sometime I'll get a chance to chat with him, but not the way I had been in the past. But anyway, back to the prayer thing. So when I came back from that trip 2 days before Thanksgiving, I was contacted by 4 different people, uncoordinated between themselves, as to asking me to please run for chair. Now, I had not been considering that whatsoever, furthest thing from my mind. In fact, what I've told people over the last few years, on occasion when people would say, would you run for chair, I said, not a chance. I mean, the high point in a chair's career is the day he gets elected, and from there it just goes downhill. And that's kind of appearing out to be true. But I was convinced to think about it. I said I would talk to some people and pray about it. And long story short is I ended up getting elected, which was a little bit of a surprise because I wasn't planning to do it. Here's my point, is along the way as I was campaigning, I had people, maybe some people even in this room that I talked to would say, I am praying for you. And the people that said that were quite sincere when they said it to me. And it was humbling, and it was nice to hear. And then when I got elected and I was contemplating, okay, what does this mean? I was already on the RNC's Faith Advisory Committee. I was one of the founding members back when I was National Committeeman. And I thought to myself, the Republican Party considers itself to be the party of people of faith. I think you all would pretty much agree with that as compared to Democrats, which clearly are not. And but I also thought a lot of the times with the Republican Party, when we do things like prayer, and I'm not saying it was perfunctory here, but a lot of times we treat prayer as a perfunctory, just part of an agenda. And even though some of the prayers are very, very sincere, a lot of times we treat it in a perfunctory manner. We say grace before meal, and we don't really think about it. But I started thinking, what would it be like if all around the state we had people from churches and prayer groups all around the state praying, not for me, but for wisdom and leadership. And I think you mentioned that, where were carols? You mentioned that this morning. It was nice to hear that, because that's where my mind is if we had hundreds of people around the state, not in any part of a program, just people who grassroots, would want to pray for wisdom in our leadership, how powerful would that be? So if you are a person of faith, and I suspect most, maybe even all of you are, think about how powerful that would be. If throughout the state, all the time, people are praying for wisdom in leadership, because we sure need that. So that was one thing I wanted to point out. And the other is the pledge, which, again, is perfunctory. We always do it. We don't think twice about it. We do both of those things at every RNC meeting. We do it also at our state executive committee meetings. But that's not always been the case. Ironically, when I was in the Purpose Center, when you saw that before, when I went to the Purpose Center, one of the things that came up fairly quickly was the annual, I'll call it, authorization for the Pledge of Allegiance. It's something that every school must consider. They don't have to do it, but they must consider it. That's actually in legislation. So I made the point, well, does the Purpose Center do it? And no, we do not. Have they ever done it? No, we have not. Well, I put it before the board, and lo and behold, it got approved. So for the first time when I was there, the Purpose Center started saying the Pledge of Allegiance in their classrooms. I don't know if that's continued to be the case, but I was there to make it happen. And then really ironically is when I first got on the city council in Wayzata, which I'm still on. I just got reelected for my third term. My very first meeting, and Wayzata is somewhat conservative and and even keeled. First city council meeting, we didn't say the pledge. It didn't even come up. No one even thought about it. So I quietly talked to the mayor after the meeting. I said, why are we not doing the pledge? He goes, I don't know. We never have. So without even making it a big deal, we just started doing it on the very next city council meeting. So it's now there, and it's going to be perpetual. Thank you. So I'm glad that I got invited here. I'm actually quite impressed in the room and the outpouring of support here. I didn't realize that your group was so big and so involved. It is now on my calendar as a routine thing. I'm not saying I can make it every time, but it is now on my calendar every month. So if I can make it, I will try to. But obviously, this is my first time. So I will say that I have to leave by 11:25, so I can't stick around for Q&A afterwards. I do have an event or a commitment at noon up in Plymouth with Liz Collin of Alpha News, meeting with her. Yeah, I was actually in the courtroom a few days ago to support her for the motion to dismiss that case. Very, very interesting few hours that I was there. I'm not familiar with courtroom drama, but it was pretty cool. And I hope she prevails, although I'm sensing that she won't in this case. Okay, so back to what we're doing here with the party. It's been a whirlwind. I assumed the office basically January 2nd because the 1st was a holiday, and my Lord, have things changed. It's sort of like being President Trump, and I'm not trying to compare myself to him, but the number of things that have occurred so quickly since I took office is amazing to me. And one of the things that I'm not familiar with doing media, TV and radio and press conferences and things like that, well, I was immediately thrust into that. I will tell you, I'm not a stand-up comic. I'm glad I didn't aspire to be one because I would fail miserably. It's not my talent. I'm a pretty straight shooter. I know there's at least one Marine in the room, and I'm looking right at him here. Marines are not typically known for being comedians. They're pretty straight shooters, and that's me. But about 3 days after I took office, I did my very first press conference about a topic I'll expound on here a little bit, which is the recall election and all the things around that. But in my very first press conference, I stepped to the podium, and it's a little intimidating. I had never done one before, and you've got all these cameras and reporters, and it's being shown live. It's not like they're going to edit it. Whatever you say is going to make it out there. And so I got my first question, and you don't know what they're going to ask. You figure it's going to be related to the topic, but it doesn't have to be. And I got a softball question first. I don't remember if it was a male or female or what, because it was my first. And so I responded in a way I thought actually worked for me. The softball question was, okay, Mr. Chair, you've now been in the office for a few days. What's it been like? Before the tough questions came. And so what occurred to me is, and what I told them was that when I got elected as chair, I thought I was getting into the business of politics. What I discovered was I'm actually getting into the business of drinking from a fire hose. And that cracked them up a little bit, so it meant the hardball questions weren't as hard as they could have been. That was about 3 days after taking the office, and I will tell you that since then, I could add a second line to that quip, which is, it's a good thing I'm in the drinking from a fire hose business because I need all that extra water to put out all the fires that are erupting around me, because that's been like that. So back to the recall. So the very first thing we did as a party is we sued the governor. We sued the governor because he acted illegally. Thank you. And we won that lawsuit, but what it was is we sued the governor, and maybe you all know this, but I'll just reiterate it, is that the governor, knowing that the Democrats had cheated in House District 40B, that their candidate, Curtis Johnson, who won that election, was an illegal candidate. He did not live in the district, and it was clearly shown. I mean, they did backflips to try and make it that he was living there, and he wasn't. The Supreme Court, or the court, I should say, ruled in our favor, which was a good thing, saying that the governor did act illegally. And what the effect that had was that the special election he had called illegally, which would have occurred a week and a half or so after session was to begin, could no longer be held at that time. And that gave us about a 2-month window of time to prepare for a special election. The Democrats, however, didn't like the fact that if they came into session, they would now not be tied, 67-67. They'd actually be down by 1 seat, 67-66. That gave us the majority for that period of time, and we could elect a Speaker of the House and elect the chairman of all the committees. But they didn't like that idea. They liked being totally in control, and the best they could do is a tie. So they decided not to come to work. Once again, we had a press conference about that, calling them out on that. I mean, what organization or company are you familiar with where you can get hired and then not show up to work and expect to get paid for it and not have any consequences? So we pressed them really hard on that. But with the fact that the special election can no longer be, like 2 weeks out, they would have to ponder being out of work or out of session for like 2 months. And the political pressure on that finally prevailed, and they did come back to work, which meant we now had a legitimate Speaker of the House in Lisa Damuth, and we can elect the chairman of the various committees. But it also gives us a great opportunity, and you all could maybe help in this. It gives us a great opportunity in this special election, which is now about a month away, to actually flip that seat. In a special election, as I'm sure many of you know, it's all about turnout. In a general election, all the people come out for that, particularly in this presidential year. In that district, I think there were something like 20 or 25,000 people who elected or who voted in that election. But when you have a special election, people are not as motivated. They're not looking at the president or the governor or anything like that. It's just a local race. And so far fewer people show up for that. So our challenge and our opportunity is to get people out to vote. We know who voted for President Trump in that district. And yeah, we're in a minority, a relative minority in that district, but we know who voted for President Trump. If we can go and actually interface with those people and say, this is how important it is for you to come out for the special election, we can flip that seat. So right now we're in the majority for a period of time. Special election, if we actually flip that seat, we now have a permanent Republican majority, albeit by 1 vote, but we have a majority for the rest of session for the 2-year biennium. Then we will have finally broken the true trifecta. We have an opportunity in the Senate as well. And again, many of you probably know this, but there is a Democrat state senator by the name of Nicole Mitchell. She was indicted under felony charges of burglary. We call her the cat burglar, a very not very talented cat burglar. She got caught pretty quickly, but she broke in and she got hit with a felony charge of burglary, and she just got hit with a second charge yesterday. So she's twice indicted now. And before the session and all the little drama that's been occurring in the last few weeks, before that, both Governor Walz and Ken Martin, the now former DFL chair, my former counterpart, both called for her to resign. Well, suddenly they're singing a different tune because it's not to their benefit to have her resign. And she and her attorneys petitioned the courts to postpone her trial until after session. And unfortunately, that was granted. So her trial is now scheduled for June, I believe. That's just unfortunate. It would have been nice to have it sooner. But they did make a case, and she prevailed. But it's likely, in my opinion, of course, that she will be convicted. And when that happens, she will be ousted from the Senate. It'll have to be that case. And then we have yet another special election opportunity coming down the road. Now, the political pressure between now and then might be so great, even within her party, for her to resign, and we might get a special election earlier. Either way, whether it's earlier or later after trial, we have an opportunity to flip the Senate, too, because they have a majority of one vote. It's an odd number of senators. It's 34, 33, I believe. So whoever gets that 34th has the majority. So if we flip it, we can get the majority there. And then we are, at that point, well on our way to flipping the state to totally red. Now, I've lived here for 31 years. I'm not from Minnesota originally. Some of you know my background. Many of you don't. When I moved here in 1994, this was literally the 12th different state of the union that I'd lived in since college. East, west, north, and south. And the realtor that I had kind of showing me around, and eventually I settled in Wayzata, but he said something I've never forgotten about Minnesota, which is that Minnesota is the hardest place to get people to move to and from. So once you're here, you kind of don't want to leave, although I will tell you in the last few years, a lot of people have wanted to leave because of the craziness that's been going on. But I love Minnesota. It's my home. I plan to stay here. I don't plan to move away to Arizona or Florida or anyplace else. I do love it here. I just hate the politics. But obviously I'm involved. I want to make sure that changes. So as far as we're concerned at the state, the campaign already started. It started day one in my term in office, the campaign for 2026. We're on the verge of flipping the House. We have an opportunity to flip the Senate, and we have a real opportunity to win the governor's mansion. And that will be, if we do that, not only will it be the first time in my 31 years here in Minnesota that we've got the trifecta, maybe even going back, I don't know how far back you'd have to go, but we would then turn the tide. And I think pretty much everyone in here would agree that when President Trump won the presidency, there was like a massive lift of weight off our shoulders, and a new optimism and energy has been sweeping across the country. For many years, even before I got involved in politics, I would say that what this country really needs is a revival. And I meant that in every sense, but particularly a Christian revival, but other ways too. Well, it feels like we're experiencing that now. At least that it feels that way to me. So Minnesota's role in that is remember, we were the only state that didn't vote for Reagan back in 1980? The only state, and everyone else is red. So we're kind of known as being a blue state, right? If we flip to red next year all the way around, the House, the Senate, and the governor's mansion, not only will we have stopped progressivism and changed our reputation, but I truly believe that we will be a part of turning our country around, that we will see that revival. And that's what we're trying to do here. So, yeah. Now, you have a keynote speaker who's going to speak about Ukraine. Is that Ukraine over here? Yeah. This is kind of off topic, not even politics, but I had an opportunity to go to Ukraine. I went to Israel, I should say. Some of you probably heard me talk about that. That was as a very small contingent of people from the RNC went over there, and I saw the worst things you can imagine. So I was in Israel right after the attacks in October 23, and then I had an opportunity to go to Ukraine just this past June. And I was on the Eastern Front, so I was actually wearing body armor, and I talked with the soldiers and went to hospitals and so on. So I have a little bit more of a sense of what's going on in Ukraine from a very, very personal level. Now, do I have time for questions? Or okay, so I could go on and on, but it's because I do have to leave before you all end, and I will be back at times. But I'll take a few questions because I want to have respectful of the time that the keynote has. Yes, sir.
voting for himself, and that would be fraud, wouldn't it? So why don't the Republicans go after him?
You talking about Curtis Johnson?
Yeah.
Well, he never got seated, so he doesn't
No,
have
I know,
any
but
vote.
he probably voted, which would be fraud, wouldn't it?
Well, I don't know what you're referring to. He never got seated, so there were no votes that came before him. He was not a sitting legislator. He won a seat that he was not allowed to fill, so I don't think he had any opportunity to vote on any legislation.
Voting to elect himself.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing questions.
Voting to elect himself, wouldn't that be fraud in the wrong district?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would. You have a point there. If he voted for himself in a district that he didn't live in and he wasn't technically a voter, yeah, that would be fraud too. But he's out. I mean, do we really want to make that fight? We got many bigger things to fight right now. Yes, sir.
Alex, first of all, first impressions are lasting ones. And believe me, you have made an excellent first impression with me and I'm sure with everybody in this room. So
well,
I want to congratulate you on that, number one.
Yeah, people congratulate me on the new job, and I'll quit back. Thank you, I think.
I think.
Not sure about that.
Here's my question.
Yeah.
Yes, the Freedom Club. Are you familiar with the Freedom Club and Ryan Wilson? And they did a great job in the last election, general election, with some of the outstate people. And are you affiliating with them or tying in with them as far as this election, the special election in 40B is concerned?
Oh, we've coordinated with Ryan Wilson, and the Voters Alliance is more what he's been affiliated with, even though he's with Freedom Club. Yes, we as a state party are working toward collaborating with all these sympathetic groups like the Freedom Club in this case, and Voters Alliance and others. But right now we're kind of putting out some fires, but we definitely will be coordinating with them. Question here. Yeah, to get the mic here.
I was just going to ask, when you had mentioned the upcoming re-elections with Nicole Mitchell and the other person, which districts are those in?
Nicole Mitchell, I believe, is in Senate District 60, and Curtis Johnson is in House District 40B. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Wait a minute. Wait for the microphone.
I can always repeat the question if I can hear it, but go ahead.
Are we still doing the recall petitions?
Thank you for that question, because I should have gone there too. Yes, the question was, are we still doing recall elections? The answer is yes. Now, the recall is one of the press conferences that I gave. The most recent one was about that. Well, they actually kind of all were, but we are pressing forward on the recall. And the analogy that actually Ryan Wilson came up with, we've kind of been going with it, is if a bank robber robs a bank and then comes back and gives the money back, you know what? They still robbed the bank. And so there are going to be consequences. So we are preparing to file a petition for recall for all 66 legislators who did not show up for work for 3 weeks. And that too, and you know, the part of that, we're making a lot of political hay out of this, even if it ultimately is not successful, because that's a very, very tall hill to climb and probably not likely to be successful ultimately. But that's okay, because between now and then we're making a lot of political hay. We will be demanding that they return the money that they were paid. We're going to continue to press them for what they did. But if this thing progresses, and we are planning to do all the steps, it is a little technical, and I don't want to get too technical with you. But what I will say is the easy step is right now, the easiest step, which is to get at least 25 signatures from each of the House districts of those people who didn't show up, so the 66. Getting 25 is easy. We're going way past that for these. We're getting 50 or more, and people love it. They're going out and they love the fact that they're getting active, and they can actually get signatures and feel like they're doing something, and they are. So what will happen is that once we submit and we say, okay, here are all the House districts, here are all the signatures, Secretary of State will have to verify that they are legitimate voters in that district, and then it'll move on. And it'll go to the Supreme Court, who then has to judge whether it's a legitimate recall effort. Since the Supreme Court is not a fact-gathering body, it's a deliberative body, they're going to take that and give it to a special, and I forget the name of the organization. It's special what? Special master, that's it. Special master who will then look at it and say, are these facts enough to move forward with a special or for a recall election? We suspect that they will do that and make a recommendation to the Supreme Court to move it forward. I think we'll get there. Then that's where the hard part begins, because if we get past that, where the Supreme Court says, yes, there is enough fact pattern here to go forward with a recall election, they can say no, because this is kind of a first ever in Minnesota history for sure. What happens then is it goes back to us, and then the hard part begins. We have to collect at least 25% signatures, wet signatures, of the number of people who showed up in those districts. So if 20,000 people showed up in a district, then we have to get at least 5,000 wet signatures on a petition for recall. And of course, you need more than that because people could be knocked out or whatever. And you've got a 90-day period to do that. Then it goes back to the Secretary of State to verify that there are enough there. And if we get to that point, here's what will likely happen, is we won't recall all 66. That's kind of pointless. It's very expensive. But we can still make a lot of political hay along the way. But if we get to that point, we'll probably select a few seats that are the most vulnerable, maybe even seats where Trump won the president, but the Democrat won the House seat, where they're pretty close, and we will laser focus on those seats and see if we can flip those. That is very long, it's arduous, and it's expensive. So we need money for that too. But we can make it happen. That's probably 10 months out. If it gets to that point, it's probably 10 months out. I saw a question over, yes ma'am, about right here. Yeah. Yep. Shout the question out. I can maybe.
We have the mic back there.
Yeah, just shout it out. I'll repeat it.
Go ahead.
I was the subject of a recall this past year in Columbia Heights. I was a council member. Went to the Supreme Court. They ruled in my favor 24 hours before the election was supposed to take place. I didn't realize that I was going to be a precedent, but I was, and it's impactful. My message is, this is not political bull. This is not sandbox playing. Everybody needs to understand a recall is impactful. I can tell you it changes your life and changes who you are as a person. Win or lose, it changes you. The Democrats, I don't think, are smart enough to understand that this can be very impactful if we move down the line and we win. But this is a message you should all carry forward. It's not sandbox. They don't get to pick up and leave. They got to pay the price for what they did.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't a question, but thank you for the comment. That is important. I'm not sure who was first, so I'll go in the far back there.
Okay. In the national scene, we have 2 senators per state. Minnesota, my understanding, many decades ago, they used to do that, had 1 per county. Okay, now they just take the legislative districts and divide them in half. So you have 1 senator for every 2 legislative districts. So my cabin up north, Paul Etke is in charge of 4 counties, and yet Hennepin County, I believe there's 14 senators in Hennepin County, so they got 54 times the representation in Hennepin County, mostly Democrats, that those 4 counties up in north central Minnesota have. Is there any talk about doing it so we can have 1 per county like it used to be? There's going to be 20 more senators then. But my understanding is they did that many decades ago in the matter of efficiency. Well, efficiency, schmissency. We're not being represented equally in the Republican Party, or the people of Minnesota in these outstate counties are really getting screwed by a couple of the metro counties that are heavily Democrats.
Okay, I'm not sure there was a question there, but I will tell you this, that we're not talking about that right now. It's not come up in my month and a half that I've been in. If that was historical, maybe that was the case. I understand why it is the way it is. I'm not justifying. I'm just saying that the Senate districts and the House districts are apportioned based on population. So when you have a dense population like you do in Hennepin County, because it's based on population, you'll have more senators and representatives than the outstate.
My point is, in this national level, the smaller states like Iowa, North Dakota, and whatever wouldn't have a voice against New York and Texas and California. Well, the outstate counties of Minnesota have no voice basically at all because Metro just steamrollers them. So is there any talk about maybe doing that so the outstate counties have an equal voice as the Metro?
Again, if that was your question, no, there's no discussion that I'm aware of about that. That makes sense because on the national level, you're right. Utah and South Dakota have 2 senators just like New York and California. They just have 2. Very wise, I think, of our founding fathers to do that, but we haven't got that here in the States. I think I'm getting the hook here. One last question.
Can you talk about whether or not there's a plan for how to combat our state not being willing to comply with executive orders?
I have not been involved in any dialogue about that, but I'm fairly certain we are going to tackle that. I put a statement out a few days ago that addressed the Minnesota State High School Sports League, HSL, where they made a pronouncement, if you will, that they weren't going to comply with the president's executive order. That's not a legislative body. That's an athletic associational body. And I put out a statement about that. So the party is combating that. That was a little first step. I am sure that will be part of the dialogue, whether it's our party doing that or coordinating with legislators to do something legislatively. I probably have a better bully pulpit and a way to impact things now as state chair than the legislators do because we don't have the power to make that change. They can make statements, but they can't make a legislative change. And that's likely where anything that's going to be done is going to be done legislatively. So, again, I got the hook here, and thanks for the time. I'm gonna stay to listen to the main speaker, but just so you know, when I get up and leave, it's because I have to leave by 11:25. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. And we could have gone on for an hour here. I appreciate you coming. I hope to see you again at meetings when your schedule permits. Thank you so much. Mentioning, in addition to him being here today, Alex is having a meet and greet this Thursday, February 13th, from 4:30 to 6 in St. Paul at Burger Moe's. That's at 242 West 7th Street. That event is being hosted by another affiliate, the Minnesota Organization of Republican Veterans, More Vets, as you probably know them. It's open to all Republicans. Tickets are $20. So that is this upcoming Thursday from 4:30 to 6. And now our featured speaker, Tom Hanson, is a former U.S. Foreign Service officer with the Department of State. Today, he'll provide us a global update on international issues and U.S. foreign policy. Mr. Hanson's diplomatic postings included East Germany, France, Norway, the Soviet Union, Sweden, and the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. He also participated in the opening of new U.S. embassies in Mongolia and Estonia. He worked on the Foreign Relations Committee of the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives and served as a director for NATO and European Affairs at the Atlantic Council of the United States in Washington, D.C. Mr. Hanson currently is diplomat in residence at the Alworth Institute for International Affairs at the University of Minnesota, Duluth. He teaches diplomacy at Carleton College. He serves as chair of the Minnesota Commission on Foreign Relations and is co-chair of the Minnesota International Business Council. He's also a member of the U.S. Foreign Policy Working Group of the British International Business Studies Association, as well as the Council of Advisors at the Museum of Russian Art here in Minneapolis and the Minnesota Peace Initiative at Norway House. As a member of the Great Decisions Advisory Committee of Global Minnesota, Mr. Hanson speaks frequently on international issues and contributes to local and international media. He delivers an annual U.S. foreign policy update under the auspices of Global Minnesota and the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, and that was at the end of January. I saw the yearly speech. Mr. Hanson holds a BA degree from the University of Minnesota and graduate degrees from Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, the Institute of Advanced International Studies in Geneva, Switzerland, and the National School of Administration, ENA, in Paris, France. Please join me in welcoming Tom Hanson.
Well, thank you, Carol, very much for that kind and long introduction. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be here. I also want to thank Chairman Plekesh for his remarks, for being here today. Honored to meet you. And I especially want to thank my friend and colleague, Colonel Don Patton, who made the connection for today's program. So it's a pleasure to be here. I hope in the short time I have here to outline for you what is happening in U.S. foreign policy. We're in a time of obviously great transition into the new administration. There are many different signals coming. I'll try to give you a kind of an outline of what's happened so far, where our foreign policy will be going under President Trump. But as I say, just looking out at the world, this is a time of great flux and uncertainty. And it's exactly 80 years, 1945, since the end of World War II, since the liberation of Auschwitz, since the founding of the UN, and since the dawn of the nuclear age. I'll be talking about that because people are forgetting that we are in a nuclear age. When I grew up, it was very much an issue on our minds. We were ducking and covering, and it was very important. Today, it's really kind of fallen off the screen, but it's still a nuclear age. So I'll be talking about that a bit. One word that people are using more and more to describe this time is polycrisis. That was coined by a fellow named Adam Tooze, but it's sort of caught on now. And it's true, there are a lot of things going on in the world. So in addition to the early signs of our foreign policy, I'll talk about the three big ones, make a few remarks on the Middle East and Gaza, on China, and on Ukraine, Russia. So I hope I'll be able to cram all this into the time allotted, and I look forward to your questions at the end. I can also stay a little later, too, if people are going to be staying. So let's see now if this... Let's see here. Doesn't seem to be advancing. Nope. Bear with me. I can start without the images. The first image is of President Trump's inaugural address in the rotunda indoors this year because of the weather. And when it comes to foreign policy, he made, I think, 3 points that are really worth keeping in mind, in addition to all the domestic issues. First of all, he declared, and I think this is something that it's a way that he frames a lot of issues and has always in his career. He said, "We will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer." And of course, he's looking at the trade relationships out there, but beyond that, it's a very typical framing device for Donald Trump. And I think it's something that connects him to voters as well, the sense of having been taken advantage of. The second point that he made was, and I quite striking, we will expand our territory. He came right out and said that we are going to expand the territory of the United States during his presidency. Of course, we've heard about Greenland, we've heard about the Panama Canal, other issues. All that is unfolding now. And then thirdly, and I found this quite revelatory, and it's one of the, among the signals that he's sending right now that I think are important. He said, we will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. As you know, he has said all along that if he had been president, the Ukraine crisis would not have happened, for example. And I'll be talking more about that in detail. He said also he wants to be a peacemaker and a unifier. And it's very clear from past statements by President Trump himself and from people who know him, he very much wants a Nobel Prize. I think he sees this as a capstone of his career. So I found those three aspects very interesting. Now, the same day, actually, he went into the Oval Office and signed a whole slew of executive orders, undoing pretty much every executive order that President Biden instituted. Because we're so polarized, because it's very hard to get a two-thirds majority in the Congress, or even a majority sometimes, everything's been done by executive order in recent years. And so the problem is that each administration comes in and undoes the basic executive orders of the previous one. So hopefully someday we'll get out of that mode and back into real lasting legislation. Anyway, he announced that we were pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement. President Biden had put us back into it. Now President Trump has pulled us out. We have pulled out of the World Health Organization. He then declared a national emergency at our border and a national energy emergency. So those are the two national emergencies that he has declared. And then he did something really quite unusual. He declared that we're going to create a new bureau, not the Internal Revenue Service, but the External Revenue Service. And this brings us now into his foreign policy, and I really wish we had the images here, because this is where they become a little more important.
Again, you had him on a stick.
Okay.
We're going to try to refresh it from that.
Okay. It couldn't be the battery in this, could it?
Nope. It's not even coming up on our computer. I apologize. Sorry about this, folks. We thought we had it on and tested, and we're going to try to recover because it is important for you to be able to see his presentation as well as hear it.
So I'll have to paint word pictures here, so bear with me. Donald Trump has a fascination with tariffs, as we know. In fact, he calls himself Tariff Man. And I expect maybe to have a T-shirt at some point that says that. But there was a previous president who called himself Tariff Man, exactly the same. And for the Republican Party, I think it's interesting to think of these predecessors of the Republican Party in the United States, which are being looked back upon now. And that's William McKinley. Now, Donald Trump has said that the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, which are the most recent ones, we were called before Trump now, came in the middle of the Depression. And they were a reaction. They were not effective because the country was in depression. He said, we have to look back to the tariffs of William McKinley, which were effective and which caused our country to become quite rich via the tariffs. Actually, back in those days, of course, this is late 19th century, our entire government was funded by tariffs. It was a much smaller government, of course, but there was no income tax until 1913. So I think Donald Trump setting up this External Revenue Bureau has in mind to really make... Oh, here we go. Here we go. Thank you, guys. Shall I try to forward it now?
We're getting there.
Okay, good.
We're not quite there yet.
All righty. Sounds good. We'll do a quick recap once they... There he is in his inaugural. We're getting there. I think if you hit slideshow... So in any event, William McKinley. And this has been something in the Republican Party for a while. Karl Rove wrote a book about William McKinley and the importance of the election of 1896 and some of the policies that were done there. So it's not just Trump. It's been in the party for a while. And now it's much more overt. And so McKinley, had tariffs. He also expanded our territory. This is late 19th century once again. So let's see if this. Well, can I help? No? Okay.
We got too much help here already.
Okay, sounds good. This sort of McKinley focus, I think, is important to keep in mind. It is informing the president as he moves forward. Now, the other aspect of this, of course, is the territorial aspect. So, yes, Greenland now is something that we are looking to at least negotiate with the Danes and maybe with the people of Greenland. There are a total of 56,000 only Greenlanders, and they want independence from Denmark. There's a movement that's been there for a while. As you know, Don Jr. Visited Greenland already on January 7th. So we'll see where this goes. Panama Canal is the other one. The Obama administration gave it back to Panama, or gave it to Panama. Trump would like to reverse this, and we're in negotiations with the Panamanians about this. So, well, anyway, that's another presentation. So anyway, and then, of course, renaming the Gulf of Mexico. En route to the Super Bowl on Sunday, Trump symbolically flew over the Gulf and announced the renaming of it. It's now the Gulf of America. And, of course, Mount Denali has been renamed Mount McKinley. So this is once again indicative of that. So tariffs are in the air. We are talking about 25% tariffs now on aluminum and on steel. We threatened 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada. These have been paused for a while. Let's see what's going on here. Anyway, there's been a pause on these tariffs for at least a month, and we'll see where that goes. But they've already had some effect. For example, right around the time of Trump's inauguration, Black Hawk helicopters began flying along the border with Canada, police helicopters. And Canada is taking certain steps now to try to, Okay, so here we go. Here's a brief recap. That's the inauguration. There he is signing all these executive orders that I spoke of. Thank you very much, guys. That's great. He's a tariff man, as I said. Now, here's the quote that I tried to remember, but I think this sort of indicates what he thinks about these tariffs. They had so much money they didn't know what to do with it back then. And that's the book by Karl Rove I mentioned, which came out already some years ago. This is the Economist magazine cover last week. They are really picking up on this sort of orientation of the Trump administration. You can see Greenland is very important in the Arctic. A lot of resources are there. With global warming, there are new trade routes opening up. The Russians and the Chinese are working on establishing a sea route between Asia and Europe that will go right across northern Eurasia, right across Russia. We would like to do the same sort of thing. We're working with Canada, but we have a problem. Canada claims the Northwest Passage as Canadian waters. We have always disputed that. For us, it's an international waterway. So this is something that is of increasing importance, given the importance of the Arctic. Panama Canal, part of the problem is that there's a Chinese construction company that is working on upgrading the canal, and to have that much Chinese involvement down there is an issue for this administration. Here he is in the airplane on Sunday, heading for Super Bowl. And here now we have the two countries reacting to, in addition to the Black Hawk helicopters flying along the border, the Mexicans have announced that they will send now National Guard troops to the border on their side. So both countries are trying to show accommodation with the Trump administration to avoid these tariffs. Especially Mexico. You know, Mexico, 83% of its exports go to the U.S. 83%. If you take a country like Brazil, it's only 11%. Also, Mexico has the largest number of undocumented immigrants here, 4 million, it's estimated, from Mexico. South America, only 1 million for all of South America. And Central America is in between with about 2. So I think part of the pressure that President Trump is putting on Mexico and China is he wants to renegotiate the U.S., Mexico, Canada trade agreement. You know, he renegotiated NAFTA, and now he wants to renegotiate again. So a lot of what he's doing, arguably, is to set up pressure before negotiating on things, right? Which is a very common strategy that he's used in business and everywhere else. Now, another aspect of this, oops. Okay. Little victories, right? So anyway, another aspect of this, and also you can look back in the Republican Party to understand this, small government. You know, Republican Party has always been a small government party. And so we have DOGE, we have Elon Musk and Mr. Ramaswamy, who they have their very young as 19-year-old assistants who are right now actively looking to cut back government in various, I can talk more about that in the questions if you'd like. It's clear that a kind of a model for this administration, and they talk about it quite a bit, is Javier Milei in Argentina, who, as you can see, has very little time for the state or state interference, and who is really doing even more than Trump in Argentina to try to bring down their deficit. It's leading to some social issues. It's not too clear where this is going to go, but it certainly is an inspiration. And this makes me think, well, first of all, in addition to this cutting the government, we have Trump's approach to allies. The Biden team was very good at alliance management, not as good at diplomacy in the larger sense. There's a different tone coming out of this administration, which I'll try to describe now. Of course, the body language here of Trump toward our allies, we all remember the first term. They're very nervous right now. He's saying now that they have to spend 5% of their GDP on defense. At first it was 2, then it became 3, now it's 5. And I can't help but think of another person in the Republican Party tradition, and that's Robert Taft. Now, Robert Taft competed with Eisenhower for the nomination in '52. And in the late 40s, he led a significant branch of the Republican Party in opposing entry into NATO. They were opposed to all alliances. They were listening to our early presidents, all of whom warned us against entangling alliances. And one reason that Taft enunciated at that time was, if we enter these alliances, it will lead to a large government, a large state. In other words, in the Taft tradition, those two are linked. And so when we see the Trump administration trying to reduce the government while arguably pulling back from formal alliances, this is very redolent of the Robert Taft tradition in the party. So we'll see where that goes. But this is a new accent that's come. Now, it goes so far, J.D. Vance, even before he came onto the Trump team, in speeches in the Senate, argued that we should not be involved in Ukraine. And his proposition, which he gave to CNN during the campaign, was, we have to strike a deal with the Russians. We have to stop pushing them into the arms of the Chinese. because China is the problem. Russia's the weaker party. And therefore, we need an agreement whereby freeze the line. Putin gets to keep what he has. Ukraine does not join NATO. They stay neutral. And we then try to negotiate a broader set of agreements in Europe. Now, this is a lot of what actually Putin has been asking for. So this is a little bit awkward. I can see where they're coming from and why they want to move in this direction to focus on the main problem in their minds, which is China. But anyway, it will be controversial, to say the least, if they actually move this far in negotiating with Putin, which they are already doing. Trump has said he's already had meetings with Putin. I mean, conversations, I guess, by phone. Now, so I'm going to digress here for a second because we're at a kind of a crossroads as a country. There are several paths forward. And this gentleman, John Eikenberry, I'm involved with the Great Decisions Program in Minnesota, and it's a nationwide program. Millions of people use it in groups like this with materials, eight issues every year. And this year, the framing issue was by John Eikenberry of Princeton. And so around the country, people are reading what I'm about to describe to you. He says there are three possible strategies for us. Number one, the liberal international leadership we've engaged in since 1945, in which we have a deep engagement in all regions of the world, where we try to prevent the rise of a peer competitor in any other region, right, with 800 military bases, the essential, indispensable nation. He sees this as beginning to fade. He sees popular support for this fading in the U.S., whether he's right or wrong, among the electorate. Second, America First, which is kind of what we have now. It's not isolationist as such, but you shrink your military footprint and you kind of focus on your own region more, which is exactly what Trump is doing. The third one, though, is seeing the U.S. as one of a larger grouping of great powers in a multipolar world, organized around what they call Westphalian principles, in other words, the rights of states. This moves away from the individual human rights values approach toward a state-to-state approach, which is what the UN is based on. And you move toward a concert of major powers, liberal or illiberal, together to uphold peace and security. And he kind of sums up by saying that this concert of powers, and by the way, here again, the 19th century is coming up. It isn't just McKinley. Here, this whole concept of a concert of powers is totally 19th century. So people who favor this argue that a grand strategy of American hegemonic leadership that privileges cooperation with other liberal democracies, like NATO, is an obstacle to building a global system of cooperation, which must include China and other non-Western and illiberal states. So he says that these three are going to be in battle with each other now for the support of the American people. That's the old Concert of Europe this is from a Foreign Affairs article recently, which argued the same thing. Now, I was struck by Marco Rubio's long interview with Megyn Kelly, hour-and-a-half interview a week or two ago, in which he laid out probably the most complete description of what the foreign policy of the Trump administration is going to be. And, I mean, tell me which of these three paths he is advocating here. He says that the great tragedy and failure of the Biden administration was that they lost track of the national interest. And in fact, Rubio says that I think actually that was lost at the end of the Cold War. It was a unipolar moment. We became sort of a global government. The idea of a unipolar power, he said, is an anomaly that could not last. We are in a multipolar world now with multi-great powers in different parts of the world. And then he said it's in the national interest of the U.S. to avoid war and armed conflict. Now we see Trump trying to de-escalate all these conflicts, right? And that quote from his inaugural, I think, is along this way. and Rubio says it would be far worse now if we had a global conflict. You have multiple countries who have the capacity to end life on Earth. So we have to have a balance between our national interest in pursuing that and avoiding armed conflict. And in general, what the Trump administration then amounts to is a return to common sense. President Trump uses that phrase, common sense, all the time, and pragmatism. He accuses the Biden team of having it ideological and too rigid. And then he says we have to accept that sometimes we have to cooperate with people we wouldn't invite over for dinner, people who wouldn't necessarily we would want to be led by. But in these larger interests, in the national interest, as they define it, we have to have a pragmatic and mature balance. So I'm just waiting to see where this goes. I mean, I think we're going to see it unfolding in the context of Ukraine. I'll mention another couple of areas where President... So there's really a mix of very interesting signals coming out of this administration in a lot of different areas. So on that basis, I'm going to quickly go through now. I don't want to go too long. The issues, the three issues that I want to describe before closing. Middle East, obviously, is getting a lot of attention right now. After the horrors of October 7th, the war crimes of October 7th, Israel has pretty much weakened the entire axis of resistance that Iran depended upon. Obviously, Gaza and Hamas have been greatly weakened, Hezbollah, and now Syria. This is what happened. You can see how this transformation took place in Syria. Up there in Idlib, you had the current government, the old al-Nusra front. It's ISIS, actually, that has taken over. It's ISIS in a business suit. Anyway, they, with Turkish support, came just down that little narrow corridor and took Damascus. But they do not control the country, not by a long shot. You've got other revolutionary groups that are kind of out in the countryside. You've got up in the northeast there, the Kurdish area, where we have troops supporting the Kurds. Donald Trump apparently has announced or is about to announce that we're going to remove all of our troops from Syria. Now, what that will lead to, because it's a vacuum, this country that used to be a fulcrum has become a vacuum now. So what probably will happen is that the Turks will continue supporting the current government, will try to set up a sort of Muslim Brotherhood leadership in Syria. The Israelis will likely ally with the Kurds and support them. And Israel has already moved in and taken some territory. So there could be problems between Turkey and Israel going forward here. The new leader, al-Jawdani, is, as I say, he wears a suit now. Nobody's really 100% clear what this group is yet, although we're supporting them. He has announced he wants to be friends with everybody, with Iran, with Russia, with us. In fact, he's told the Russians that they can keep their military base up in Tartus. The Russians were about to open a new base, and they still will in Libya, but now they're getting the green light to stay there. And as I say, he says he wants good relations with Iran as well. So this is an unfolding story that we are pulling back from if he follows through. Now, meanwhile, Russia and Iran are getting closer and closer. Iran's been helping on Ukraine. Russia, this new agreement will have Russia bring more air defense to the Iranians. There's a concern in Washington right now that having lost the axis of resistance, which was Iran's deterrence in the Middle East, they will look for a new deterrence, nuclear weapons, that they might make a rush for nuclear weapons. So to the extent that the people have said in the administration that if Russia makes them feel more secure, that's maybe a good thing, because then they won't go for nuclear weapons. And Trump talks about trying to strike a grand bargain with Iran. Now, a better deal than we had in the nuclear agreement. So we'll see. He wants a Nobel Prize. Now the other aspect of this, which is very important, and it gets into the geopolitics of Eurasia and the way the Middle East fits in, because what happened with Gaza is linked to this larger issue of competition with China. So Russia and Iran are going to deepen and create this red corridor, the north-south corridor, which will make it a lot easier to do trade and to get down to India. So this is in the works. It's only one of many corridors. In red are all the ones that China has been doing. We are trying to compete with that. We want to be involved in Eurasia. And so far we haven't been. So in addition to the yellow one, which is the one that Iran and Russia are working on, we, 2 months before October 7th, proposed the one in blue. It's called the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. This was a big part of Biden's foreign policy at the end. This was to compete with China. Now, what it needed was good relations with Saudi Arabia and a peaceful Middle East to go through there. So this has become Netanyahu's framing device for everything they're doing in the Middle East right now. He spoke to the UN General Assembly last fall, and the whole speech was about the blessing and the curse. The blessing is if, maybe by eliminating the axis of resistance, we open up for this corridor that the U.S. has, this east-west India corridor. The curse is if the radical forces in the Middle East coalesce and block this. And Netanyahu frames it in terms of U.S. competition with China. Israel being essential to our competition with China. In other words, making the stakes much bigger. Now, we have this hostage deal. Phase 1 was signed under some pressure from the Trump administration on Netanyahu. I mean, Steve Witkoff, even during the last years of Biden, was in the negotiations and was the guy who really drove it through. But phase 2 will be very hard. Israel is deeply divided. On the one hand, they want the hostages back. On the other hand, they want to destroy Hamas. And they don't want to withdraw their troops until they have destroyed Hamas in their minds. So you may have seen that President Trump, having seen the emaciated hostages coming out yesterday, set a new deadline, just like he did before inauguration. Remember, he said, if the hostage deal hasn't been signed by my inauguration, all hell will break loose. Well, now he's saying all hell will break loose if all the hostages aren't released by this Saturday at noon. And he reiterated that today. What does it mean to have all hell break loose? I mean, a lot of hell has already broken loose in Gaza. So stay tuned. Negotiating ploy. Anyway, the right-wing members of the parliament, Mr. Smotrich and Mr. Ben-Gvir, are very happy about all this. They were threatening to withdraw from the government if they'd gone into phase 2, which would have brought down the Netanyahu administration, which would have been very destabilizing. So we'll see where this goes. And meanwhile, Gaza, I mean, yes, we were talking about occupying it and developing it. Everyone is kind of trying to figure out exactly what this will mean. President Trump has said just today that the King of Jordan is in town, and he's going to put all kinds of economic sanctions on Jordan and Egypt if they don't accept all the Palestinians. And Trump said yesterday, asked the question by a journalist, no, the Palestinians will not return to Gaza. They will be permanently in these other countries when they're displaced. That's what he said yesterday. So where this goes is very hard to say. There's a lot of beachfront in Gaza. And Jared Kushner has talked about this for a couple of years now, actually. Of course, he didn't want to be involved in that. So we'll see where this goes. Now, it's not going down well among our allies, or especially the Saudis are not on board for this, as you can imagine. This is Prince Turki Al Faisal, who was one of their main, former head of intelligence, former ambassador to the United States, very influential still. And he said on television just a couple of days ago, he said, what comes out of President Trump's mouth is not digestible. And he said, I can't explain exactly what this is, but he said the U.S. is now embracing far-right Israeli ethnic cleansing. That's the way he put it. So we'll see. There'll be a lot of resistance to this, but Trump is doubling and tripling down on this. He's doing very well in most opinion polls, 53% positive rating, 70% in the recent poll saying he's doing just what he said he would do, but only 13% support this Gaza ploy, according to this last poll of the American people. So we'll see where this goes. Now, China, I'm really zipping to the end here. China had a $1 trillion trade surplus last year. Total record. They are, whether it's electric vehicles or whatever, they're exporting all over the place. This is obviously a big issue with President Trump. We have new tensions, sanctions on them. Now, Xi told the people in his New Year's speech that this time China is going to respond tit for tat to all of our tariffs. The first Trump administration, they tried to kind of, with Robert Lighthizer, play the issue this time. So he says retaliation, adaptation, diversification is going to be the way. And so, yes, they've already instituted tariffs. So this could turn into a trade war very easily, in addition to the other issues we have now. China is basically still focusing on a kind of a geoeconomic strategy involving the BRICS, and see how large the BRICS are. Indonesia just joined the BRICS. They are working on a common currency, actually not a currency, but a means of settlement outside of the dollar. President Trump has said any BRIC country that is involved in this effort to undermine the dollar will face 100% tariffs. 100% tariffs, anybody who signs on to this thing within the BRICS. Stay tuned. Now, obviously, Taiwan is still important. The Biden administration is the first ever to declare Taiwan a U.S. national security interest, which indicates we don't want it ever to go back to China. I am struck by the fact that Trump has not uttered the word Taiwan once. In his long interview, Rubio did not utter the word Taiwan once. This was the whole deal for the Biden administration. And I'm starting to wonder whether this is another area where, working with other great powers, you try to, in other words, whether it's Ukraine or now Taiwan, will this become less important if the foreign policy is less based on democracy versus autocracy and is more economic based and more, as I say, sort of concert of powers based? All this is still up in the air, but it's fascinating that there's been no mention of Taiwan. Now, the key point of tension between the U.S. and China is tech. All these tech advances, quantum AI, have military implications. It's possible to leapfrog. If China gets ahead of us in some of these things, hypersonic missiles, they could leapfrog us without aircraft carriers and all the heavy, heavy investment we did in a previous era. So this is why there's so much focus. And so President Trump has the Stargate project, $500 billion AI investment. Unlike Biden, who financed his AI program, the Inflation Reduction Act, up to $1 trillion of subsidies, which means taxpayer dollars. It's adding about $1 trillion to our deficit. The Trump approach is to turn to the private sector and have them finance it all, not the taxpayer. So far, yes, Sam Altman, Larry Ellison, SoftBank are signing up. They claim they have the money for this. It's a different approach. And as they were announcing this big project, DeepSeek came out. I won't go into detail, but the Chinese are showing signs that they can work around the sanctions, and they're moving very fast. This is a cheaper, much cheaper technology that's just as good as OpenAI, apparently. And it's open source. Finally, bear with me, Ukraine. This is going to get interesting soon. Here you can see what the Russians have taken. Just this week, the Ukrainians, with NATO support, tried another offensive in Kursk and were beaten back. So they're losing in Kursk now. Russia is expanding in the east. So militarily, Russia's winning. Ukraine just doesn't have enough men, women. It doesn't have enough forces to carry this forward. So what do? Do we take the risk of sending in our own ground troops? This is where the nuclear thing comes in. Are we willing to take nuclear risks here? And that's what the Biden team pushed the envelope, actually. So Keith Kellogg is the negotiator now. He very much wants to have a freeze and then some kind of thing where Ukraine joins NATO but not right away. And Zelensky is demanding security guarantees if whatever happens. So we'll see where this goes. President Trump has said he understands Putin on Ukraine. He's even said that the war started because of NATO expansion. I mean, yes, it is true NATO was expanding, and yes, it is true we reacted when the Russians came into Cuba. If you're looking at a great power world and trying to understand a little bit where the other ones are coming from, you might say something like that. The Biden team never would have said that, ever. For them, this was autocracy, democracy. So we'll see where this goes. Putin says he wants to talk, but he has three things that he says he will not waver from. They keep all four of those oblasts north of Crimea, all of them. They don't control all of them right now. Notice if this agreement is struck, the Ukrainians will pull back and the Russians will fill in territory to have the whole oblast, which would not be great optics, actually. And he's saying that if the war goes on, and he says that we're willing to keep fighting, right? If we don't get our terms, we will then take the next four. He's saying that if the war goes on, they will keep 8. And so he wants, the 4, he wants neutrality for Ukraine, never in NATO, and then a large negotiation on European security. And he says he will not take anything less. He will not just take a ceasefire. Now, my concluding point, this is getting dangerous in terms of nuclear weapons. The Russians have a new missile called the Oreshnik missile, hypersonic, probably cannot be stopped. They shot it once. You can see how quickly it would reach any of the NATO capitals. We are counter-deploying nuclear weapons, now the Tomahawks and others, in Europe. In the late 80s, this was a huge thing in Germany. You had millions of people marching against it. Today, you can hear a pin drop. As I say, there's less focus on nuclear and nuclear danger today. So this is building up, and you've got, these are the estimated warheads, 9 nuclear countries. South Korea very much wants to go nuclear now, and they're talking more and more about it. They've got the North Korea issue right next door. And China is building up toward 1,000 missiles. North Korea is building up. And all the while, the arms control regime has collapsed. Almost all of the prior agreements negotiating to the Cold War have collapsed. The last one is the New START, which will collapse probably next year. So this is a dangerous situation. This is the Hwasong 19 missile, which the North Koreans just rolled out. Hypersonic, you can hit anywhere in the U.S. So they've got to be roped in here somehow too, right? Because right now it's out of control. So in this context, Donald Trump, it's my final slide, spoke to the Davos conference, to the World Economic Forum in Switzerland in January. And he talked about making America stronger, obviously, all the things that he planned to do. He took great pride in announcing that he would be president during the FIFA World Cup in summer 2026, which will be in the U.S. The World Cup will be here. The L.A. Summer Olympics in 2008, he will preside over, and the 250th anniversary of America. But then he said something else. He said, we cannot allow the nuclear danger to go any further. He said, during my presidency, I'm going to negotiate with the Chinese, with the Russians. We are going to make this a big priority to get at the nuclear issue. Out of the blue. Once again, something that the Biden team never would have done. So we'll see. At least I'm encouraged that he's addressing this because I've been increasingly nervous as this has been building up. So we'll see. As I say, I think he really does see the Nobel Prize as a capstone to his illustrious career. So with that, I will stop and look forward to your questions, and thank you for your patience. And if people have to leave, just please do.
Can you hear me? Yeah, there we go. Tom, going back to the Clinton administration, correct my bad memory on this. The Ukrainians gave up their nuclear weapons with the agreement that NATO would not extend to the east, which would include Hungary and Romania, Poland, the Baltic countries. That, of course, has been broken. That promise was broken. I don't know what caused it, but I think that's what really put a thorn under Putin's saddle, right?
Yeah, I mean, just the idea of NATO expansion. The first Bush, I worked a lot in the first Bush administration, and I was in the negotiations, and I know that there were verbal assurances given to the Russians, verbal, by Jim Baker, that if Germany could unite and join NATO, which was a big deal, we were not planning to expand NATO further, and the Warsaw Pact was dissolving anyway. Bill Clinton is the one who decided otherwise. In 1994, Bill Clinton decided that we would start expanding NATO. The then ambassador to Russia, Jack Matlock, who was in the negotiations, claims in his memoirs that Clinton did it to get the Polish vote in the midterm elections of 1994. I mean, I can't believe that was the reason, but apparently it was part of the calculation. So the Russians kind of accepted the first wave, the Visegrad countries. Putin was in when the Baltic states came in 2004, and he said, we accept that. Okay, they're part of the West. They've always been Western. So okay, but no further. That's where this big red line was drawn. And so when it came to Georgia in 2008, or now Ukraine, the Russians really are digging in their heels. Now, when it comes to the Ukrainians, yes, there was the Budapest Agreement in 1994. We were worried about nuclear proliferation. When the Soviet Union collapsed, several of the republics had nuclear weapons from the old Soviet Union. And our top priority was to get those out of the hands of those countries, right? And so we were the drivers of this agreement whereby Ukraine and Kazakhstan gave up their missiles. You could see trouble brewing. I remember in the negotiation, the idea was to give guarantees to the Ukrainians that if they did this, that we would all protect them. And the Russians said, no, we would like to use the word assurances, which is not as strong as guarantees. You could already see right there trouble was brewing, right? So, so all this, but then, for the Biden team, the idea is, why shouldn't Ukraine be free to choose its alliances? We're not going to make any deals over the heads of the Ukrainians. It's up to them. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. That was their idea. But if you have more of a great power approach, then you can see how great powers react when things are happening right next to them, right? Like Cuba. So, I don't know. It's going to be up to us as an electorate to figure out which way we want our country to go on this, right? They're very different paths. And it seems as if the Trump team is a little bit heading to this concert of powers. I know the Europeans are worried. I follow the German discussions on YouTube, when they're talking among themselves in German. They're very worried that the U.S. is moving toward a sphere of influence approach and that Europe will not be in their sphere. And that therefore they better create their own sphere quickly.
Carol, I've got to go, but I want to make the folks... many of you attend an organization called the Rough Riders. It meets on the first Friday in Golden Valley. Last fall, they had an Israeli diplomat come in and speak, and so when I was working on programs in April, not next month, but April, Steve Hennigs from the Jewish Council is going to be giving the it'll be modified from what happened last fall because of all the things that are going on in the Middle East. But anyway, Steve Hennigs will do a expanded Middle East, Gaza, Syria update from what Tom gave today. But April program, it'll be a great one. And thank you, Tom. I got to go.
Steve's a good man. He's a good man. That'll be a good program. So, yeah, maybe one more question if somebody... or maybe it's all clear. Yeah, yes.
Wait for the microphone, please.
As a person in the diplomatic area, I wonder how people in your occupation, so Trump's talking about Canada, he's talking about Greenland, he's talking about Panama. How can he talk about annexing them without letting China have Taiwan and Russia have whatever they want in Ukraine?
Well, that, as I say, there are signs that it's America first, right? And I think it's also our region first. In other words, I think that his focus is that with the European, he said yesterday, I can imagine in the future Ukraine will be part of Russia. He said that. And that may be true, although I don't think Putin wants more than what he has there. They've way overextended themselves already. And the Western Ukrainians are virulently anti-Russian. They would never be able to stabilize Western Ukraine, ever. So I think that they know that. So I don't think that it will all go that way. But and also in the Middle East, in one of his press conferences, he was asked about Gaza. He said, "Oh, well, that's their problem." So these are indications of that. What I also see, though, is what's happening in the State Department, in USAID, with the Doge approach, and everyone's on leave. And they went into USAID and took down all the letters in front of the building, and they went in and took down all the photos through the whole building of aid projects. And it looks as if USAID will be folded into the State Department now. And so and there's a total hiring freeze. So I have a number of students who are about to go in. They passed the Foreign Service exam and everything, and suddenly now they're totally in limbo. And there are a lot of people who, if these cutbacks happen, think of Javier Milei, right? And these people will all be tumbling onto the job market at the same time in D.C. So some people taking the early outs that are being offered are doing so to get ahead of the queue and looking for a new job, right? Because pretty soon there'll be a lot more. So our foreign affairs establishment is in upheaval right now. There's no question. But as I say, for Trump, oftentimes he'll shake things up and then either negotiate or kind of, so it could be part of just a tactic that he's using here early. We'll find out. Yes?
I'm sorry. I'm waiting for you to call on me, Carol. Sorry, we had a mistake there.
Okay, yeah. So I guess, so that's it, right? Oh, he has one more. Yeah.
Yes, so my question is, China has a retaliatory tariffs against Americans, or the U.S., but what does China buy from the U.S.? I mean, Buicks and Apple phones. I mean, what cost would it be to the United States?
Not much. They're becoming more and more self-sustaining, right? They've been cutting back their trade with us, and that's why the imbalance is so huge. So yeah, but where we can hurt them is trying to cut them off on tech, cut them off from high-performing chips, although they're finding ways around it. They are more and more focused now on Eurasia, on the developing world. They're developing very close relations with Russia in terms of energy, Turkey. They're the number one trading partner of all of Latin America, right in our backyard. And that's something that I think the Trump administration wants to change. It's like our region, right? So, yeah, but you're right. Our leverage is actually not as strong, and that's why I think this time the Chinese it's tit for tat this time. Yeah, so we'll see. The danger for the administration is that this could be inflationary. But then again, people may understand the larger context. So we'll see. I think there's one more over there.
What about Chinese buying up the farmland around?
Trump has made that an issue. Yes, they've been doing that, even more in Canada. They've been buying a lot of land in Canada and operate your neighborhood farmer is a member of the Communist Party of China, this kind of thing, attending, local council meetings and all that sort of. Anyway, yeah, that's been going on for a while. Australia too, and so I think that the administration has that on the agenda to try to cut that back. Yeah, they see that as a national security issue.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. It was really an honor. Thank you.
And Tom will be at the back of the room to answer more questions. I know we could go on for another hour with questions here, but some people would probably like to get home before noon or shortly after. So thank you so much for that great insights. Our next meeting is March 11th. Our featured speaker on March 11th will be Jim Schultz. He's the president of the Minnesota Private Business Council. He'll describe what a functional and responsible government looks like. So quickly, are there some guests or first-time visitors who would like to just tell us your name and what town you're from? Bring the microphone here, please. Lynn, here.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I'm from the Western Edina area, and I was excited to find this group down here because I haven't really seen a lot in the southern part of the metro area. I've gone to a few groups up in Anoka, but it's a long drive, so I'm excited to find this. So,
well, we're excited to have you. Thank you so much. Are there other first-time attendees who want to give us their name and town? Okay. I have some additional events besides Alec Pleshish being February 13th over in St. Paul. We have Young Republicans are having a February happy hour. That's Thursday the 27th at Billy's in Anoka. That starts at 5:30. You can go to the minnesotayrs.org/events page to get more information. The next Residents for a Better Bloomington RFAB meeting is February 24th at 6:30. I don't have a location for that yet. Take a look at their website, rfabbmn.org. They hosted a superb open house town hall meeting on February 1st, and the video of that meeting is available now. I don't know if it's on their website yet, but we'll try to publicize the location of that meeting. People from the the Minnesota House of Representatives, Republicans, came and gave us some insights, very similar to what Alex gave us, but in quite a bit more detail. Take Charge is that's Ken LaQual's organization. They're hosting their fundraiser gala Saturday, April 12th in Eagan, starting at 5:30. The keynote speaker will be Lieutenant Governor of Virginia Winsome Earl Sears. Individual tickets, this is a fundraiser, are $150. The website for more information is takechargeus.com. I also have the postcard here with the QR code if you are able to use that. Senate districts are going to be holding their conventions soon. On March 1st, we have the Senate District 50 and Senate District 56. Both are holding conventions. Take a look at your local Senate district. Find out when their convention is. They will be, most of them, electing their executive officers for the Senate district as well as the state central committee members. So keep track of that. Attend your local convention. Tonight in Apple Valley, Senate District 56 is hosting a Pints and Politics happy hour at Bogart's at 14917 Garrett Avenue. That's in Apple Valley. As Alex Plekish mentioned, the special election down in Senate District 40B, or House District 40B, that covers Roseville and Shoreview, is March 11th. The endorsed Republican candidate is Paul Wickstrom, Wikstrom. His website is wickstrom4house.com. If you live in that district, please be sure to vote. If you don't live in that district, you are allowed to volunteer or monetarily support the Republican candidate. Remember to tell a friend about Republican Party of Minnesota and Republican seniors. I have our what we call the RAC card. I have copies of that up here. Hand it to anybody who's over 50. If you're more of a business card person, we have the small business card size. We have our meeting dates. We always meet on the second Tuesday of a month, except in December. So all the meeting dates are on a card. You can pick one of those up. I have event information here. If you want to get more information about any event, just come take a picture of that event page with your phone so that the paper copy is left for others. We had a lot of great information presented. The video of today's meeting should be up in about a week or less. We'll send out an email message telling you that the video is available for you to review. I was sitting here taking notes as fast as I could. I know I missed stuff. So I'm planning to watch it again myself. We have time for 30-second announcements, and I have at least 3 people who have said that they want to speak, and one of them was John Whalen from AMAC.
Thank you very much, Carol. Meetings. If you have the stomach for a virtual meeting tonight on your computer in the comfort of your own home, AMAC is presenting Representative Pam Altendorf, Republican from Red Wing, with a Minnesota legislative update, so you can get firsthand what all the craziness that's going on in the Minnesota legislature. I have flyers on this back at the bar here. I don't have any drinks back here, but I have flyers if you're interested. That's tonight at 7 o'clock, and it's free.
Thank you. Judd Mowry, are you here? Judd? I don't see him. He didn't make it. Al Muirhoff has information about an event here in Bloomington that's happening. We've got a microphone coming to you, Al.
Yeah, just for those that live in Bloomington, regarding the new Health and Wellness Center, it's my understanding that a lot of the activities at Creekside may be eliminated. They may not have much room in the new Health and Wellness Center. And on Thursday from 10 a.m. to noon this Thursday at Creekside, there's an open house where you can go and see what the drawings and some of the plans are. But if you want to get some of your input in, you go to bloomingtonforward.org, www, of course. Scroll down to the Health and Wellness Center. They have 3 projects mentioned, and you can look in the community input opportunity. Let's talk Bloomington and get your 2 cents worth in. And I think it's very important, but I'm not on top of this issue. It's just I've heard by, the grapevine that some of these activities that people are doing at Creekside, which is going to close, I think, in April, may not get duplicated. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. And Ron Extem, are you here to speak about RFAB? Nope. Okay. Any other 30-second announcements? We've got one here. Hold on a second. Let's get the microphone to you. It's coming.
Senate District 51 is convention on March 6th.
Thank you. Senate District 51 on March 6th. And 51 is the east half of Bloomington and Richfield. Any other quick announcements? All right. It's time for... Oh, one more?
Have released and pardoned, I believe, most of the January 6 or all of January 6 people. There's still people left behind in Leavenworth that, as far as I know, haven't been pardoned yet, and they sure as hell deserve one, okay? Because they made a mistake of volunteering, which back in our day they came and got us, But anyway, www.uniformalphapapa.org.
Thank you.
Go on there.
Any other quick announcements? All right, we are going to draw for our door prize. No, you draw. You draw. If you have a red ticket ending 0647, come see me, 0647. All right. And draw one more, please, Tom. Thank you. Ending 0600. All right. We have a couple winners. Thank you very much. We have the room until noon, and we'll see you March 11th. Thanks so much.
Republican Seniors of Minnesota. For more information, please visit republicanseniorsmn.com. While visiting our website, you can click on the video tab to watch videos of past meetings. Also, look for other tabs that bring you to our live player and other special video programs. Or on YouTube, search for Republican Seniors of Minnesota.